half calf almond milk latte. Hey guys, a couple people have mentioned that my show title, Questions and Coffee, maybe is a little bit too close to Coffee with Ola, which is his interview show. I mean, I don't even do interviews. I just look at some pictures and talk for 15 minutes. But, you know, it's okay. I have thick skin, and I was thinking about it, and maybe it's a good opportunity. If I change the title, I could maybe pull in some of that European demographic that I've been going after. Get some of those European guitar players to come in. So I worked pretty hard on it. I got a new title. So new title is Hola England, will we chug this coffee? I can't use that either. It's been a pretty emotional week, to say the least. Obviously, we lost the greatest guitar player that has ever lived, and that hurt pretty bad. Obviously, my condolences, and I think our condolences go out to his family and all of his fans that are in need of a little love and compassion. Hats off to Eddie Van Halen, the great one. And let's have some fun in his honor. I know EVH had PCMs in his live rack, but do you think he used the 480L for recording? I have seen images of the 480L remote at 5150. He's talking about the Lexicon 480L reverb unit. And the way that reverb works is there's this huge rack mountable brain, which is 3 or 4 rack spaces, maybe 5. And then there's a remote. You would sit the remote on your console. They still sound glorious. They are rich and wide and warm, not maybe as perfectly acoustically natural sounding as like the Bricasti M7, but that Lexicon sound is so iconic that it transcends how realistic it is. It just sounds like every record from the mid 80s. So yeah, I'm sure he had one, but let's take this opportunity to take a little look into what else he has in his studio racks. The first picture is Ed with Valerie. Looking here, I love these dubbing cassette tape decks. Just the absolute worst. Over to the left, there's 3 1176 compressors, and that's total studio. Every studio has 1176s and Pultecs. I mean, it's kind of like, especially back then, that's what you had, 1176s and Pultecs, and then LA2A, maybe 1. And so, speaking of LA2As, right above the great one's head, he's got a little LA2. And then back to the center, those are Lexicon delays at the top. That's before they got to like the PCM 41 and PCM 42 and shrunk them down to 1 rack space. They had these big like primetime delays. And they sound awesome, but like, that's my problem with the TC 2290. Do I want to give 2 giant rack spaces to a mono delay? It just hurts my soul to do that. Like 1 rack space, 1 mono. 2 rack spaces, that stuff better be stereo. These are the Eventide H910s, I believe. And so Eddie, since Diver Down maybe, had started to use this micro pitch shift. So you take your sound and you could, the Eventide guys, I think, pioneered this, not a half step, which is like 1 fret on the guitar, but an increment in between that, a tiny, tiny increment. So if there is 100 micro steps in there, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what they're called, then if you go like 12, it sounds like a chorus. Now, if you take another one of these H910 units, which were probably like $2,500, throw it over here, and then maybe turn that one up 12 or 13 or 9, and now you've got this mega chorus happening. These units had an inherent delay because it took time for it to figure out how to pitch shift, you know? So then you were getting a delay as well. So to get that authentic Eventide sound, it's a little bit of delay and a little bit of micro pitch shift. So going down the line, these look like Universal Audio preamps, and this is where you get to the Pultex. It's just a tube EQ, and essentially it's two bands. Like, you want bottom end, turn it up. And then the top end, similar to, because the bell curve at the top was really wide, or you can make it really wide. So it's just like, you want it to sound better over here, more, less, more or less. They're great. And the very bottom, that's a mid-range EQ. Over here is API EQs, and the console that he's in front of is a Universal Audio console. And here behind this lovely picture of Eddie and Chris Connolly is a stack of 4 Eventides. So gone, or at least put aside, are those H910s, and now he has the H3000s. And they switched up the cassette dubbers for DATs. It's like going through a time machine. Really amazing. The cool part that I thought was at the very end, where he kind of walks up to his, like, the throwaway rack, the stuff that they're not using right now, but it's still like it's around and available, back kind of in storage. And that's where you see those Eventide H910s, those old Eventides up here. It's got some like PV stuff, like that looks like a valve verb. That sounds so weird coming out of my mouth. A PV, like that tube effects? Is that what tube effects? Nice little Rockman modules. That's the Roland delay that's been seen in his guitar rig as well. Some synthesizer action. And this I thought is so cool. He's got his John Suhr, Bob Bradshaw custom audio preamp right down there in the cool custom audio purple. Pretty pictures! Ow! This blows my mind. He's jumping up like a 5-foot vertical and then off the speakers, which certainly look like they're going to come back down and crash and kill you while playing guitar. I've never seen anyone pull off a more badass on stage jump than that. This is one of the mega rigs. Interesting, in an article that I read, Ed talks about getting his sound and how later in the years he would use one head and then slave it to like a power amp. But in the beginning, he thought that's the way Black Sabbath did it, is you just get a million heads, you run them all into cabs, turn them all on, and you just annihilate everyone, singer included. So that seems like a clear-cut example of singer annihilation. I wish I knew whose photo this was so I could give them credit, because it's an awesome photo. This is when Eddie Van Halen, Steve Lukather, and Michael Landau got together and jammed out at the Baked Potato, which is like a cool kind of rock jazz fusion club here, actually kind of down the street. And look at that. He's running his Soldano, renamed Soda, and clearly an early 5150 prototype. I'm so glad they changed out the front panel of that, because that old like tiny knob PV thing is just does not convey power and awesomeness. So this rig is great, not necessarily because the rack is awesome, but it is. But their set list up in the corner. I Can't Bitch 55. Ain't talking about bitch. That's probably the madness that happens when you're on tour for like 2.5 years straight. I think this was the latest and last rig, which is monumentally awesome. What time is it? 51:50! Actually, yeah, that is what time it is. November 1988. One of the first magazines I got. My dad came busting into my room one day just to tell me that headless guitars looked really stupid. This was when I was in high school. He hated them. But this one, I mean, this is so awesomely 80s. So awesomely 80s. This is where I kicked off, and I was like, yeah, man, I see nothing wrong with these headless guitars, especially if they're painted red with black and white stripes. Oh boy, Dave Mustaine always has something great to say. Oh, they have him reviewing records. Ain't Got You from Crossroads from the Yardbirds. Dave says, whoever it is, the drum sound is dated. I don't like this kind of music. I'm not into honky-tonk blues. All right, Dave. Oh, welcome to the jungle. Instead of trying to do a guitar solo with your nuts and your dick, it's better to use your brain and your heart and emotions. What is he talking about? "5 years in rock guitar." They just broke down the legends. What'd they say about Ed? It would be impossible to view any 5 given years without mentioning the name Edward Van Halen. By the mid-'80s, while every new kid on the block was dying for a seat anywhere near his throne, Van Halen took a turn towards keyboards and a shot at the pop charts. I love his keyboard playing. I actually think that in his later years, it would have been so amazing to see him like score a TV show or a movie or something. I think he could have done some unbelievable stuff. I mean, that's not like a controversial statement to say that Eddie Van Halen would have done something unbelievable. That's all he did. This is well after the release of 5150, but it was kind of a new thing for an artist to own their own studio, and I think that's another kind of thing that Ed pioneered, like a legit studio. Say, did you study the blues? I didn't really study it. When I first started soloing, those were just the simplest, easiest notes to hit. And he said, hey, I'm doing the blues. He'd talk about his passion for cars also. Maybe it's a speed thing. In terms of soloing, I never try the same approach, and if I'm overdubbing a solo, I might try 3 or 4 of each one. I'll start and finish completely differently. Then if I capture the magic, that's what I go for. I remember the solo in Mine All Mine. I didn't know how long I was supposed to keep going. I didn't know when the end melody was coming up. I was looking at Don Landee, their producer, saying, now? He's going, not yet. I'm going, give me a nod at the last time. I can't count for shit. I have no idea where I'm at. That's why I like soloing live, because the guys watch me and they just, they end when he's done. Oh, wasn't learning piano easier than guitar? And he says, because everything's right there. It's like you have 10 instruments at your fingertips. Do certain keys mean something for you? For soloing, I like the key of A. I don't like E. I don't know, maybe that's because everyone else plays in E. What musical elements do you start with when you write a song? And he says, it's the beat, the rhythm. Sometimes I'll just have Al play a beat and just jam to it. The interviewer says, I love the way you used trans trem on 5150, but you didn't use it on OU 812. I wanted to hear the next level of development. He said, I just didn't use it to write. I was more into keyboard stuff. I would have liked to hear that too. There are a lot more different guitar sounds on this record. And he says, that's because I use different guitars. 12-string electric, Fender neck with a Schecter pickup. I use a lot of Strats. You could hear that on OU 812. And it makes sense. I mean, he's such a Clapton lover, but the Strat sounds can be a bit of a bummer because they're still a little thin. And When It's Love, I love the solo sound on that. That's clearly a Strat. But like Cabo Wabo, compared to doing it live, the live version with his Franken Strat with the humbucker and stuff sounds huge. And then the Strat, layered studio sound, not so huge. There, the solo on When It's Love has a Clapton vibe to it. Because I kind of like that. When I first started soloing it, it ended up sounding like Clapton. It was intentional. I used a Strat full-blown through Marshalls. Do you feel you play better sober? People tell me that I do. I don't know. I'm just getting used to it now. I'm more nervous, so sometimes I have to think about what I'm doing more. How was Live Without a Net? I love that video so much. I've watched that so much. If you haven't seen that, that to me is one of Eddie's best tones. How good was that performance? He says, it was pretty mediocre. We filmed 2 nights, and then they finally were just like, yeah, whatever. Nothing got fixed except for some background vocals. Sammy left all the lead vocals. Dang, man. It's crazy. Would you like to step out of Van Halen? And now we know that he didn't really ever. I don't know. I wouldn't know them till I'm in it. I never really tried. Steve Lukather and I have gotten down a couple nights in the studio when we were playing everything, bass, drums, and guitar. Did a gig at the Baked Potato. What are some of the great guitar albums that players should have in their collection? Live at Leeds by The Who, Wheels of Fire, Cream, Goodbye, One of a Kind by Bruford and Van Halen. Van Halen 1. In the same way that I think of our first record as a good heavy metal guitar orientation, Blow by Blow is the epitome of a great classy instrumental record. Is your Kramer different than what you buy at the store? The only difference between this and a store-bought one is that I built it. It's a Kramer neck and body. The Floyd Rose is the same. The pickup came from them. I'm not picky about that. The sound comes from the wood and how you play it. It's more in your fingers. Yep. Other people have played my stuff and it just doesn't sound the same. Marshall had into these H&H power amps. I opened for Black Sabbath and he had 8 Laney amps, each through a cab. It was so loud. So I did the same thing. I had 6 Marshall heads, packed them all together, but each through a separate cab. It was so loud, I'd be totally numb by the end of the show. Oh, look at this. I'm in the process of building an amp with Jose Arredondo. Oh, that never came out. That would have changed. That would have been a really interesting alternate universe. Miking a guitar, I just use a Shure SM57 and 58. Did the death of your father affect you musically? For a while, it made it very hard for me to even think about making music. I had an empty feeling because a lot of my drive was for him, to make him proud. It was his name. He was proud. Look, and this ends with Eddie and a Kramer and Floyd Rose ad. So that's it, gang. Thank you guys for watching. Be nice to each other. Hey.